It's Wednesday, Hump Day. The weekend is close now. You rush through breakfast and kiss your wife goodbye. Finding a stranger in your car was the last thing you expected. Stop the Threat starts now. Hello and welcome to Stop the Threat. My name is James Towle. On this week's episode, we take you to Oregon for a reenactment of crime in which we call Morning Surprise. But first, let me introduce you to this week's guests. Wes Doss. Wes not only has a very impressive 20-year background in both the military and law enforcement services, he has authored articles in magazines such as American Handgunner, American Cop, Police Magazine, and SWAT Magazine, and found time to write 2 best-selling books that focus on the law enforcement and military trainers. Monica Rodriguez. Monica's had 13 years experience as a law enforcement officer in the Florida area. She has participated in undercover assignments with the FBI, the DEA, Border Patrol, ICE, as well as the United States Social Security Administration and the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Monica is currently an executive protection specialist on long-term assignment with a private foundation. Lieutenant Dan Marcou. Lieutenant Marcou has had 33 years on the job as a law enforcement officer, written 4 books, and most often recognized by his articles in Police One. But before we get started, I know you've done some research, Lieutenant, on the 5 phases of an active shooter, and can you share that with us?
Yes, I've met 4 professionally, and I did some studying because of this, and I came to the conclusion that most active shooter killers go through 5 distinct phases. And the first one is a fantasy stage where they write it down, what they want to do, they dream of it, they draw pictures of it, and move into the planning stage where they'll start deciding who, what, when, and where that they're going to do this thing. And this becomes crucial because they will put their intent down in writing, and they will still sometimes talk to people about it. But when they get into the preparation stage, they become kind of silent, and they start accumulating guns and weapons and whatever they need for their day of infamy. Then the approach is the next stage where they're actually heading towards a target. This is a dangerous stage for law enforcement and civilians to become involved because they are dangerous at that point. Now the implementation stage is when they actually start the shooting, and we need an honorable gunfighter to go in there and stop them, because nothing's going to stop them unless they run out of ammo or victims. But because of these other stages, we can stop these killers before bullets are flying, people are dying, and families are
And how
dying.
do you go about doing that? How do you get the stop part? I missed that. How do you stop it? If you know the 5 phases, how do you deal with it?
You recognize when someone says, I feel like killing somebody in my
You need
my
to
school,
share that information ASAP.
You hear or see something, you say something.
Okay, you need to call somebody and discuss that. And I think, reading in some of the newspaper articles I've read, that has taken place, that there have been people who have reported to law enforcement, and law enforcement, in fact, acted on that and fit them into the 5 phases that you speak of. And so is that part of a book or an article?
I have written articles on some of the saves, but you don't see the headlines because you avoid the headlines because nobody dies.
Right, right. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's
hey, when we
wonderful.
come back, I'm going to show you part 1. Don't go away. Welcome back, viewers. I want to review with you a little bit about what we're going to see here. This is called Morning Surprise. You probably live in a very safe neighborhood, and I hope that you do. You never expect anything to take place in that neighborhood, so maybe you're a little lax in some of your security. Our reenactment shows that maybe we should think about security in our safe neighborhoods. Let's watch part 1.
All right, honey. I'll see you later.
Okay, have a good day at work.
Thanks.
Hey, what are you doing to my car?
Okay, Monica, I'm going to start with you. What did you see?
Well, it's a crime of opportunity. This individual comes in and breaks into the car, and we law enforcement always tell people, you should just run in, call the police, grab your cell phone, call the police. But in reality, our first instinct is to address the issue. And so what I saw was something that I would have done. Hey, what are you doing in my car? What are you doing? And we tend to forget that that's just our natural instinct, and that's
So maybe voice intimidation would work here.
Many
or
times
maybe you
that
would try to do it that way.
You would try to do it that way.
Yeah, and I would say that if you can legally carry, then what are you doing walking out to your car without your gun? Okay, so. But maybe in this instance, and I don't know that for sure, possibly he's not able to do that. But voice intimidation would have been a way to do that.
Right. Many times when you address the issue, they don't think they're being seen. You startle them. It's the element of surprise. Right. They get startled. They run off, and that's your hope. You hope that that's going to be the end of it.
I'd go with this. If you're going to park the car in the driveway, those little driveway alarms, I think they're available everywhere for next to nothing, and they go off if a car comes up or someone walks and breaks the alarm. I think this is just very typical that it could happen anywhere. And let me remind you now that this is a real reenactment. This crime did take place in a very nice neighborhood, and it can happen anywhere. Which means that if you have a neighborhood watch program, go with that.
Absolutely. If you have neighbors or a neighborhood watch program where people are keeping an eye on your property, then that kind of would alleviate some of the problems here.
Sure. You see somebody walking down the street you don't recognize. Is there anything wrong with calling 911?
The police get suspicious persons calls all the time, and it's better to get one and it not be a suspicious person than to not get one and actually something is happening.
Right.
So.
Well, I think as we've said in the past and other shows, wearing a hoodie is certainly not an indication that you're a bad guy. So just because you see someone walking down the street with a hoodie, that's probably not a good indication to call 911. But if you don't recognize the person, that is, huh, LT?
Anyone that's out of place, there's a whole realm of situations that occur where you have suspicious mannerisms, trying to stay in the shadow, bulkiness under the clothes, because the guy that's going to do this has probably hit about 6 cars before he's done this one. If you're going to leave the car out, don't have things that are, candy in the front seat, like large quantities of cash or things that are, hey, I'm going to break into that car and get that. Leave it out of sight. And when you see something, call that rather than confront the individual.
Okay, and that call, when it comes to you on patrol, is going to say what, Wes?
When the call comes out?
Yeah.
It's just we've got somebody that's a suspicious individual in the neighborhood. And then as people would have called it in, you're probably going to draw a little skepticism during broad daylight. I mean, you have solicitors that walk through neighborhoods, unless it's a gated community. But, like Monica said, a call like that, to get that kind of call, is better than to not get that kind of call. Let law enforcement make that determination when they show up.
All right. Yeah, the other thing is, I would guess, and I'm going to kind of go with you on this one, I think you opened the door to it, is if he's walking down the street, he may have already hit a couple of vehicles. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Maybe he's just walking down the street looking for the right vehicle. And if you certainly if you've left something in the vehicle that may attract him, then he's going to go forward and maybe try to do something.
Also, leave your name with the dispatcher. If it's an anonymous call, that limits what a police officer can do. So if you leave a name, that makes the call believable, and that allows the officer to make the contact on your concerns.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Because if you do leave the name, then the officer he's almost compelled at that point to make contact with you when you arrive, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Right. So now you have something that you have made a report about. You don't know that law enforcement hasn't gotten 5 of those same reports the same week. So you're not wasting their time. I guess that's probably what I'm trying to get here, right? That you're not wasting your time by making the 911 call and just saying, you know, there is somebody that I don't believe he lives here. He doesn't look right, and it just doesn't feel right. Could someone come by? And they will do that. And like I said, you don't know how many people have made that same call. And following up on LT, don't leave something in your car, even though you feel like you're in a very safe neighborhood. Don't leave something in your car that's going to be obviously attractive to someone wandering around looking for something easy to do, because they are looking for opportunity. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back, viewers. We've seen part 1 of Morning Surprise. You're in a typical neighborhood that you feel safe in. You have a stranger walking down the street who is obviously casing some of the home areas and thinking about either burglary or certainly breaking into something. And he has chosen this particular vehicle. We don't know why. We don't have information as to why he chose this. Maybe because the car was in the driveway and he just felt like this was the car he was going to go after. And he does, and the homeowner discovers him in the car stealing something. Let's go and see part 2.
Hey! What are you doing in my car?
Oh my God! Send someone quickly. I've got the gun pointed at him now. The police are on their way.
Just shoot me.
You're not worth shooting.
Well, okay, a lot of things could have gone wrong here. You want to start with that?
You know, starting from the very beginning with the, you know, him coming outside and all the what ifs as the vehicle and him, and, you know, not carrying out outside of his own home. You know, all things considered, you know, going to blows with the guy, having a knockdown drag out, I don't know. I mean, he could have yelled for help from his wife. He could have made more of a commotion. He could have done something.
Yeah, you don't know what the bad guy's armed.
You don't know what he's armed.
He could have a knife. I mean, you know, I'm not real comfortable with the going after them part. Again, we're sort of on that verge of going hunting again. And I mean, I can understand the anger behind it. I can understand the homeowner. You know, this homeowner happened to be a pretty healthy guy who worked out well, and he probably felt pretty confident doing what he did. It's not something I'd necessarily recommend. I think things could have gone left or right in here. LT?
You got to ask yourself, not, is this worth killing for? Is this worth dying for? We as police officers will always assess whether tactically it's smart to make contact and whether waiting for backup is a better option. In this particular case, it probably would have been wise to let him run off and let the police, because they'll probably catch this guy with a good description in this neighborhood. They'll probably catch this guy eventually. And he ultimately was armed, because if he'd have pulled that weapon out, it looked like it was an ice pick or something very much like it.
Right, he was armed, correct.
But
he was armed, yeah.
Ask yourself, is this worth dying for?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I just have a feeling that a lot of people out there are going to say, he's in my driveway, he's in my car, he's broken my window, I'm angry, I'm not going to turn around and go back in the house. I mean, I guess that is probably something that some folks might do. I have a feeling that a lot of people out there are not going to do that, and I'm not going to encourage you to go forward, because I think the LT has a good point there, that he was armed with an ice pick, and you could have become the next guy going to the hospital rather than just losing whatever was in your front seat. So it's a judgment call on your part, Mr. Homeowner. but I'd be really careful in this particular instance. You want to add to that?
They were very fortunate that the outcome was the way it came out, because it could have been bad. Her actions, she grabbed the phone, she grabbed the gun. That was a judgment call. What would I do on, if that were me? Probably the same thing. So she did call 911. She addressed the suspect, but I agree. If the suspect was running, let him run off. He will get caught. There's fingerprints, there's a lot to go on, and that may not have been the only vehicle that he was in that day. So just let him run off and let it go, as opposed to, jump on him and start punching him.
Yeah, you got to give credit to the wife. She did happen to see this. She knew what to do, right? She gets the phone, she gets the Biden, and she goes outside armed, and she's prepared to defend her husband and their property. Maybe there had been some training here. This doesn't sound like someone who's never thought about it before, as we were saying earlier. Maybe they've thought the process out. If something happens, here's what we should do. I think she did the right thing. She did call 911, not knowing what kind of danger her husband is. She goes out the door armed. This could lead to more than she's expecting, but would you have done anything different?
I mean, once she's already engaged, no, I think she was pretty much spot on once she chose to engage the way she did. Right. She was committed. There wasn't much else for her to do at that point except hold and call 911.
Okay, what could have gone wrong here?
Well, a lot could have gone wrong, but I think that, considering the fact that her husband is under attack and she picked her best option, she could have verbalized it a little different and said, I don't want to shoot you, but I will if I have to, rather than what she did say, because those things are going to come out on tape later. And we want to win not just physically at the time, but legally later, and then ultimately emotionally. And the things we say can taint a proper use of force.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think she was probably panicked as well. I mean, looking out the window suddenly from breakfast and finding your husband in a hand-to-hand combat situation. She did what she thought was right at the moment without giving it a lot of thought, but I think it worked out well for them. It's something that you might want to have a plan with your wife if something does happen. We'll come back and we'll talk to you more. Thank you for coming back. We've seen Morning Surprise. We've made many remarks about it. I want to hear from you on what you think may have happened or what you think should have happened. But I'm going to move on now because I need to answer a question from a viewer. And that viewer sent a question in saying, is being well trained and being a good shot sufficient preparation for engaging the bad guy? I thought that was a pretty decent question, because I think there's a lot more to it than just being well trained and prepared. Okay, there's a psychological thing that goes on in here. I think if you're meeting an overwhelming force, you're going to think one way. If you're meeting an equal force, you might think another way. How do you feel about that, LT?
I always put it in the realm of physically ready, legally ready, and emotionally ready. You want to survive on all three levels. And there's an element beyond emotionally. Can I actually point this weapon at another human being when I need to and take that shot? It's one thing to be able to make the shot, but it's a vastly different thing to take that shot. And then after you have, to survive what comes next, because justifiable use of force quite often will lead to an unjustifiable but realistic lawsuit. And
I think that's a real important point, and I'm going to come back to that, but I want to hear what Wes has to say.
Simply being able to hit a target, like the LT saying, is one thing. And a lot of people are under the assumption they go to the range, they stand at the firing line, they shoot tight little keyholes in the target, that's sufficient. And in knowing that there's the various elements that come into play under duress, and there's a tremendous amount of duress when it's a you against another individual type situation. It's not a game where you put a couple of quarters in and play it. It's a tremendous amount of stress. You know, and I usually I'll say in class, you know, because people will assume that it's not a very physically enduring activity, but literally when you're in the middle of a short-term gunfight, it's like running the Boston and New York marathons back to back.
Right.
I mean, you're burned when this thing is over with.
Right.
And a lot of people don't take that into consideration. We do different things under stress, and if you aren't prepared for it, no matter how expensive the gear is you've got or how good a shot you are, it's your preparation and your committal during that preparation that's going to make all the difference in the world.
And that's psychological, what you're speaking
Without
of.
a doubt.
Right. Monica?
Yeah, the other thing that they need to take into consideration is tunnel vision, which I think you were trying to explain that. There's so much adrenaline that's going through your system, which is why it's like running a marathon. And then there's that tunnel vision that doesn't allow you to see everything that's going on. You're just so focused in on what you're doing that you're not taking into consideration everything that comes after the fact. And those are the parts that the lieutenant was talking about with the legal ramifications and the emotional and psychological ramifications. If you're not physically, mentally prepared to take on that kind of situation, you know, it's really hard to say, you know, what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, I don't know any mental training outside of maybe watching the show, quite frankly, because we'll show you the reenactments and we'll discuss them, and we'll discuss them with you. I want to hear back from you on your feelings, and so far you've sent plenty of emails in the show saying what your feelings were, and I think that's the only mental preparation I can think of. No one's going to teach you how to be mentally prepared. We're running out of time, and there's so much more we could cover on this, but I'll see you again next week. Be safe, be trained, be alert.